Sorry, as you pick up your coffee.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. Yesterday was the final session at which the IHP recommendations were set before you. This session has been set down in the calendar as a chance for you to ask any questions that you have following that process. There is another one of these sessions also scheduled for a little later in the process. Thank you.
Right. I will start off with Nalty.
Cool. This is one, actually it's a pity I didn't get to put it to the commissioners, but in the first briefing, I think Trevor said the Environment Court had a series of decisions where it was entirely inappropriate to rely on MFE guidance documents around the NPSUD, like for instance that the Wellington trains are mass rapid transit. Do you guys know of a ruling or rulings from the Environment Court that substantiate that?
I'm not aware of the particular rulings. I will write to the Commissioner and ask him to clarify.
Thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Right. The first two questions I've indicated to the Chair already. Councillor Brown tried not to roll his eyes. I do want an amendment to make sure that the central city is subject to hydraulic neutrality rules. It seems as quite a few people are sympathetic to that. So do I just need to draft that up and then you'll provide some advice? And they only seem to go on the advice of one submitter too, which is a bit. I mean, I totally understand why the commissioners made that decision, but it was a bit.
So, if you write to me requesting an amendment with what you are looking to achieve and why you are looking to achieve it, I'll allocate a planner to assist you with that.
That's marvellous. The other question I've just got for now. Someone just told me to get over it, but I'm not over it. I've put through 2 provisions to make housing more affordable and completely got thrashed on them, although I would like to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues for supporting me. The commissioner, sorry, that's just an aside. The commissioners said in terms of the affordability of the housing, it was back to council to look at the mechanisms that that would help with that. So it's not, the amendment I'd be looking at is not actually something that could be put in the plan because we can't do inclusionary zoning, we can't do housing funds. So am I able to do an extra amendment which says that council has to go back and look at it again, and I do want inclusionary zoning looked at again, and I do want subsidies basically to be done.
So I will ask Mr. Wharton to discuss that with you later. The form that would take is an amendment to investigate the matter and then report back, and then from there you can decide whether a plan change is necessary.
See, my concern is that we've had now a number of amendments to, through the planning process to investigate. The investigatory work's been done, so for example on the inclusionary zoning. So what would we be doing in saying investigate again? Would you literally be doing more work?
Should you wish to use previous investigations, you could strengthen an amendment to instruct a plan change.
Right. Okay, and can I do extra, like ones that are policy, like, providing a subsidy, like the Affordable Housing Fund? Can I do that through that process, or does it have to be done through the normal processes?
So a subsidy would have to come through a long-term plan budget line.
So can I direct through this process, or do I really just have to do it separately?
I'll have to take advice with my colleagues.
Yeah, I think, through you, Madam Chair, I think probably yes, I own it, because if you recall when Council adopted the spatial plan, there was a number of recommendations that were put by councils that were passed, which had multiple impacts on multiple business units, really, and this is where the Housing Action Plan came from too, I think. So I think it is possible, but I'll get Sean to provide some advice.
That would be super. And just the last question for now. Again, oh my God, let's get Wellington moving, spent forever. We still actually haven't even put an MRT line through this. So are we able to, again, suggest that a plan change be done to do that? It's, for me, irrelevant whether the government funding is there. We just need to make it future plan provision for it. Kia ora.
So you could instruct a designation to proceed. and that would create a process where a notice of requirement was drafted to protect the route.
But you have inclusionary zoning because I want to make sure that route's protected for affordable housing.
I've not seen designations used for housing previously. I have seen them used to protect mass rapid transit routes. So we would have to have a little look to see whether inclusionary zoning could be done through such a mechanism.
So this is quite a general question to start with, and I guess my question is, what opportunities, if any, are there for our officers to provide us their advice on the IHP recommendations?
So this is a matter I've been looking into myself. The advice of officers is going to be on the form of decision making rather than the substance. So it is not for us to add weight to an officer's previous position during a 42A report. That would be unfair on other submitters. What we do need to provide you advice around is the lawfulness of decision making, particularly with compliance to higher order instruments, so things like the National Policy Statement on Urban Development.
So, and just to be upfront, I've already asked you for advice about whether the IHP recommendations are consistent with the NPS-UD. So do you want to maybe talk to me a little bit about how that might happen?
So at present, that advice has been referred to our legal team. They are coming back to us with advice on how you account for that in your decision making. I have not yet seen that advice.
The other piece of advice that I have asked for is about the impact of all of the IHP recommendations on provision of, the potential provision of housing, and when is that looking to be likely?
So the advice on the implications of decisions is in the final stages of preparation. It still needs to be QA'd.
Thank you so much.
Just yesterday, the decision on removing the hydraulic neutrality requirement in the city, I just wanted to understand, because I've got to admit I haven't read that section yet. Was there other evidence provided to the contrary?
Is Maggie behind me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Maggie, could you come to the table and answer the councillor, please?
Kia ora, Councillor. Sorry, could you please repeat that question just so I get fully grasp it?
So the commissioners referenced a submission that said that it would cost $1 million to implement what was needed to become hydraulically neutral. And so my question was, were there other submissions to the contrary of that, or that backed that up? Like, what else was there in terms of submissions on hydraulic neutrality in the city centre zone?
We, as I understand, this is probably a better question for the commissioners, but I did not see any other submitters speak on it, and there is economic evidence provided by council. If you would like to look into that, I can send that to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. That's it from me.
So just to really clarify this, if we were to come to the position internally that the recommendations we received were inconsistent with the NPS-UD, would the onus to amend that be solely on decision makers, or would we, as an organisation, default to the relevant provisions in the notified district plan?
So if you believe that the NPSUD has not been satisfied on the balance of decision making, it will be your duty as decision makers to address that balance and find a position which you do believe does satisfy it.
Cool. Councillor McNulty.
I think the hydraulic neutral. Believe it or not, this is my first district plan process, so I'm just trying to equate whether I guess what's normal in this process. So, it seems that in hydraulic neutrality is quite a good example. The water tank in Miramar was another one for our questions of clarification. That a solo piece of evidence or a single submitter showing up really provided a significant amount of weighting in the way the panel came to their decisions. Is that normal of other district plan processes that officers have been involved in or seen across the country?
It is my experience of district plan changes that the written evidence is normally the primary evidence, and then the oral submissions derive from that. So people would normally speak to the matters in their submissions.
Because this ISPP process, is that like ATM machine, ISPP? Because the ISPP is a relatively new process, have there been any other alternatives to Commissioner recommendations that have gone to Parliament in New Zealand through this?
Yes, the Kapiti district have referred a decision to the Minister for the Environment.
Last one, because this came out of clarification, we talked about the Johnsonville line versus Melling line with same levels of service, and the Commissioners clarified that because there was planned future investment on the Melling line, I believe that might be decades away, that they saw a material difference. Because that came through questions of clarification, am I able to consider that in my evidential weighting on what was in the plan, or do I have to dissuade that?
I would think it extremely difficult if you could not take the answers the Commissioners gave you to clarify the positions into account in your decision making.
And would that be scope or evidence for potential amendments in your view, if they've given that in questions of clarification?
I don't think it would be scope, but I will need to check with the lawyers. But it would fit into reasoning.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Randall.
I just want to clarify that point about the Melling line. If there was no submitted, so first of all, if in, for example, the Commissioner's assessment of the district plan change in Lower Hutt, if no submitter submitted that the Melling line is not rapid transit, could the Commissioner still find it was not rapid transit?
I'm not entirely certain I understand the question. However, in this case, the consideration of the Melling line in this process would appear to derive from the Commissioner's answer to a question of clarification, rather than from a submission in the Hutt City process.
Okay. Was there any submission to the Wellington City Council process that said that the Melling line wasn't rapid transit?
Some submitters did compare the Johnsonville line with other railway lines in the region, and so in relation to whether it was rapid transit. But to my recollection, they didn't refer to a decision. No, actually, I'll take that back and just stick with my original comment that yes, the submitters did raise that, so the panel did consider it.
So it was submitted who said that the Melling line is not rapid transit?
So submitters did look at Melling and other lines, and I think in terms of the detail of what they discussed, I'd like to perhaps provide you with specifics rather than try to recall exactly what they said.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor-elect.
I was going to say which one, but there's only one of us. I wasn't able to ask the commissioners the question yesterday, but I was wondering, especially around the hydraulic neutrality, whether the evidence that they received was taken in regard to if the developer wasn't taking on the cost of implementing that hydraulic neutrality, what the cost imposed on the infrastructure by council would then be?
So the question would be, if the developer wasn't to do hydraulic neutrality, how much would the extra pipes and infrastructure cost?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Do we know if any evidence was provided on that?
I'm seeing nodding.
I think Maggie's approaching me from behind.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
The economic evidence, which I can provide to everyone if they like, details a user pays system, and it also details the infrastructure cost that will be put on if hydraulic neutrality was not achieved.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, that does bring us to the end of this session. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. You hover around if that's okay with officers, but note that so we've got a bit of time, we have to do the work. There's going to be another Q&A session as well.
Yeah, we know just before the decision. Right. Okay. No last minute amendments?
No, the week after next.
Week after that. So we've got 2 weeks.
There's no scheduled meetings for next week.
Sorry, just so we'll clarify when's the next Q&A?
So next week the paper will be lodged, and then the 12th is the Q&A.
And then decision on the 14th, is it?
Yes.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you, Linga.